Welcome to How I Raised It, the podcast that goes behind the scenes with entrepreneurs who've raised capital. We uncover the tips, tricks, and techniques they use to get investors to write a check. Strap in and turn it up.
Hi, welcome to another episode of How I Raised It, produced by foundersuite.com. Today I have Jeffrey Harris of Springbig coming to us from sunny Boca Raton, Florida. How's it going today?
Everything is great. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. You're actually our first cannabis-related business on this show. I've been kind of wanting to get one on for a while because it's such an interesting space, but glad to have you on. So this will be fun. So I've kind of teased it. What do you guys do?
Yeah, so Springbig is in the loyalty and digital communications software business. We provide cannabis retailers with the software tools that they need to develop and manage their customer loyalty program and to be able to smartly communicate with their customers via SMS and email, leveraging all of the data that we help them collect via their point of sale. So they have the ability to be very smart about how they target and message their customers directly to drive more foot traffic, drive more revenue, more profits.
And so it's, how many retail dispensaries are there in the country? Do you have a rough idea of that?
Yeah, I think there's like three categories of dispensaries. You have the ones that are actually open and operating, right? So there's probably, I would say, about 6,000 to 7,500 of those types of companies that are actually open and operating. Then you have a whole bunch of stores that are in what's called the build mode, the development mode, meaning they received their approval to open up a store and now they're working to get it open. And then you have the third category, which people that actually have been awarded licenses in various cities and states, but they haven't even started the development process. So the actual number of licenses is probably way over 10,000. But in terms of actual stores open, I would, our guess is somewhere around 6,000, 7,500.
Interesting. And how many states are legal nowadays? I've lost track.
So recreationally, I think there are 8 states that are right now that are legal, and medically there's probably another 24, 25. So I think in total there's somewhere around in the low 30s that are selling cannabis related product either for medicinal purposes or recreational purposes.
Very interesting. And Florida is a recreational or medicinal state? What is Florida?
No, currently it's medicinal. It's a pretty big market here, obviously, big population. Obviously, the biggest markets are out on the West Coast. So California, obviously, is a huge market. Colorado is a huge market. The state of Washington is a huge market. Oregon's a big market. So those are probably the biggest markets. They've been around the longest, and they've been around the longest recreationally as well. And then you have, and then the Midwest is starting to pick up. There isn't anybody, I think Michigan just approved recreational sales, but I don't think it's going to go live for a little while. And, as states, they approve recreational, but it takes about a year for that process to go through to actually be able to sell it recreationally. But we work with both retailers that are recreational retailers or medicinal retailers. It doesn't really matter to us.
Interesting. What do you think is if you go ahead 5 or 10 years, do you think we'll have 25 states legalized, or you think all 50? I mean, do you think what do you think the end kind of market cap is on how many states will legalize?
I think ultimately, I can't tell you if it's 4 years or 8 years or 12 years, but ultimately I think it's going to be federally legal across all states for recreational and medicinal use. I think right now, even in the states that have both, the differentiator is really in the tax rate that you pay, meaning you pay higher sales tax on a recreational purchase that you do on a medicinal purchase. So you will find, people even in a recreational state that are buying medicinal product because they have a script to do that, and it's less expensive for them. So that's why if you would say, like, why does Colorado have medicinal and recreational? That would be the reason why. But ultimately, I think every state is going to sell this legally. I think it's, as everyone likes to say, I think, the train has left the station here. It's happening. Whatever side you are on, whether, you think this is a good thing or not a good thing, or you're like me, which is kind of like in the middle, which you're not really sure yet if it's a good thing or not a good thing. But I think ultimately, I think people will have the ability to make those same decisions, right? So just like you can decide if you're going to go buy a bottle of scotch, you'll be able to make a decision if you're going to go buy some cannabis related product.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. It's I grew up in Boulder, Colorado. Of course, Colorado was one of the first states to legalize, and Boulder was always a pot friendly town, so to speak, and
right.
Then it just exploded when it was legal, and it became a tourism.
I was just talking to one of my colleagues yesterday. He said he thinks that there close to 1,000 storefronts open in Colorado today.
Wow, that's amazing. So you mentioned that you're kind of middle of the road, I guess, or so to speak. So where did you come up with this idea? And I was curious, like, are people moving into the cannabis space just as opportunists, or are they devoted potheads that now can make a business out of this, or what's your backstory?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes and yes. So I happen to be I've been in the loyalty industry for about 22, 23 years. I still own a loyalty company that does loyalty marketing work for non-cannabis retail companies. So that was where my training was. And myself and our CTO, a guy by the name of Mark Horbal, we actually started Springbig not as a company focused on cannabis. We started Springbig as a company that was going to create a small business loyalty offering for the small business market, the yogurt shops, the pizza shops, the nail salons, the hair salons. And we actually created this business with that pretense in 2014. And we built the technology. We started marketing the software, started building, our customer base. And then there came a point in time, actually, where we realized that it was very difficult to get to the decision maker in the yogurt shop, right? Because the decision maker in the yogurt shop's the owner. But most of the time, the owner's not there that often. They pop in and pop out, and they have service employees that are working servicing customers. So we were finding it actually more difficult than we expected to get to the owner of the business. Mm-hmm. So we were looking at our business at the end of 2016, and we had 2 medicinal dispensaries on our platform. And they were spending a lot more money than our other average customer. And we said, let's look into this more. We looked into it more. We did about 3-4 weeks of research, and we saw that there was an opportunity in the cannabis space. There was one other company that was doing this kind of work, but there's always room for more than one company. So we decided to switch gears and fully focus on the cannabis market. And it happened to be a great decision because the market is constantly growing all the time. And there was a real need for our service offering, for our software and our product. But more importantly, the size of the retailer in the cannabis space is larger than like the standard yogurt shop or pizza shop. They do a lot more volume. So they have management in the store all the time. So therefore, they have decision makers there. So we were able to actually do a much better job at getting in touch with the decision maker, which has helped us grow much faster than we would have grown if we would have stayed in the other industries that we were in.
Yogurt. It's interesting. So I've noticed this as a trend. I've seen this at some of the tech conferences. You're having this cannabis market exploding, and you're seeing the accounting software for cannabis, the POS systems for cannabis. You're seeing all these sort of things that you find in other industries. I guess, why does the cannabis industry need its own specific loyalty marketing tool versus just using what's already out there? Like, why is there a specific version?
It doesn't. The bottom line is it doesn't. I mean, what happened was, I think that, I think there's still, for companies that work outside of cannabis, there's still this aura of, do I want to get into cannabis, and how will my non-cannabis customers feel about working in cannabis? So it basically just left the door open to be there first, right? So we didn't get there first, but we got there second. And by getting here second, we've built a brand, we've built some brand recognition. We have, hundreds and hundreds of retail stores on our platform. We have millions of consumers on our platform. So now it's at the point where, we're a recognized brand name in this market. So So it's not that somebody who has loyalty software, digital communication software from outside cannabis can't come in and do the work. They can. But, we've learned a lot over the last couple of years. We understand this cannabis space very well. We understand the mentality and of the decision maker and of the customer. So, and we are making sure that our platform is built to service their needs. Not that their needs are unique per se, but we're continuing to understand what the kinds of things they're looking for and building it in. So theoretically, a non-cannabis company could have done the same thing. And in fact, we were a non-cannabis company, right? Springbig was non-cannabis, and we just said, you know what, we're going to switch to this vertical. So we're a software company. That's what we do. We're a software and a marketing company, and we happen to just focus on this vertical. And it's been we've been fortunate to have some nice growth through it. But I think that's because we have a good product, and there's not a lot of competition in the space.
I guess it certainly helps with a marketing perspective if you can focus on a certain market, all your messaging, your branding, everything else. And are you able to get a list of like every dispensary that's applied? Right, so you can kind of get to them even before they open. Is that sort of part of the marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. There's like, the marketing and the sales game is, pretty similar to any emerging industry, right? So you need to understand what's happening on a state-by-state basis. You need to be able to understand, what licenses were issued, who they were issued to. And there is definitely a timing. You don't want to get there too early. Like when they're just starting to put up walls, it's kind of like they're focused on a lot of other things, not necessarily the marketing software that they're going to use, but a month or two before they open is the time that is right for us to start talking to them. But, we also talk to a lot of existing stores, right? There's so many stores. They might be using something and it may not work for them, or they're not using anything, or they're using their point of sales loyalty module. And we provide a lot more it's a much more feature rich platform in this area. So you have the ability to focus on, new customers coming in, opening their doors, as well as existing customers.
And what's the business model? Is this just a straight SaaS model, or is it a per usage fee, or what?
So it's a SaaS model with a twist. So the twist is that, we have 6 different monthly subscription packages that they could buy. There isn't really a difference in the software features that they get with those packages, but there is a difference in how many messages they get as part of those packages that they could use every month.
Yep.
And then the other difference is, depending on which package they buy, if they end up going over, and most of our clients do go over their monthly allotment because it's a heavy messaging market, because there are not a lot of other ways to advertise and communicate with customers.
Yep.
Their price per message will be lower if they buy a higher package. So, but what we try to do, our philosophy here at Springbig is that we want to make sure that we're finding the right package for the customer. So we don't oversell. We're not sitting there saying, oh, you want the $2,500 package a month, if in fact the $950 package will work just fine. We're looking for long-term customers, and we know over time they'll grow, because if you think about it, everyone's customer database grows over time as new customers come in. So we know if we take care of our customers and do right by them, then they will continue to grow with us over time.
And the retail, my perception is the retail is a intensely competitive space, right? I mean, these guys are probably just eking out a margin. Is that accurate or not accurate?
Yeah, I mean, in some states, there's probably a little bit more margin than others, but I think you hit the nail on the head. Retail's retail. And I think, they're fighting it out every day, and they're fighting it out on price, they're fighting it out on location, they're fighting it out on marketing, they're fighting it out on promotion, they're fighting it out on all the fronts that you would expect a retailer to fight it out in. And that actually is to our benefit, right? Because we provide them with a tool to hopefully differentiate them from others. So it's helpful that there is the kind of competition that there is, meaning if you were the only guy in town, they wouldn't need our work. They wouldn't need our service.
Sure. Yeah. Interesting. But most markets are, and again, I could be wrong about this, they'll cap how many licenses they give out, kind of like a liquor license. Is that accurate too? Is this or?
Yes and no. I think, they may start out with a beginning allotment of licenses, but they always add to it. And the reason why they always add to it is there's a lot of income for the state in this business, right? The tax rates are very high on the sale of this product. So, the states start seeing, wow, look at how much tax revenue we're getting. We want more of that tax revenue. So let's open up some more stores, right? Let's give some more licenses and open up some more stores. It is a great way to fill the gap, the budget gap at a state, by allowing cannabis to be part of their equation, because they generate a lot of tax revenue.
Yeah. Very interesting. All right, let's talk about fundraising. So the business was existing beforehand. Was that a bootstrap business, or was that a venture funded business, or kind of what was the?
It was bootstrapped. Pretty much, we did get some friends and family money, but it was other than that, it was pretty much bootstrapped until our first raise that we did in cannabis, which we did about a year ago. We raised about 2.6 million in the fall of 2017. Which was a seed round, which was very helpful. Actually, it's funny. That was, and then we did our A round a couple months ago where we raised another $5 million. Interestingly enough, the seed round was much harder to raise than the A round. We were younger at the time. We didn't have as much revenue at the time. We didn't have as much traction at the time. So it was definitely, more challenging. We got it done. It took us about 5 months to get it done for the seed round. And I found it to be an incredibly great learning experience, actually.
What are some of the top lessons or things that you kind of, glean from it?
Relationships matter.
Uh-huh.
It's like, it's trying to find the right people to connect with, and leveraging your network to connect with people who can connect you with the people that are going to want to hear your story. And then once you get, and the other thing I found amazing is once you get, everyone is waiting for that lead investor. And like before we raised the seed round, I said, like, what's the big deal about this lead investor? Like, why is everybody so focused on making sure you have a lead investor? And then it's interesting because there are some people that like to be in that lead position, and there are a lot of people that like to either co-lead or follow on in a round. And it's easier to find people that want to follow on versus lead, right? Lead takes a lot of work. They're responsible for the due diligence. They're responsible to vet the management team. They're responsible for a lot of things. So therefore, people love to tag along with a leader. So we happen to have gotten, our story was a very interesting story. We got, one of our original partners introduced us to a VC firm, a tech VC firm in Chicago, who was ready to give us a term sheet. And this would have been their first investment in cannabis. And they were having just a normal monthly update call with one of their big partners, limited partners, who pretty much flipped over the idea that they were going to be making a cannabis investment. He kind of couldn't believe it, and he voiced that he couldn't believe that what they were going to do. So actually in the last minute, they had to back out of giving us the term sheet, which was, I remember I was traveling at the time, and to tell you I was deflated is an understatement. I was like, oh my God, like I have to start all over again to find a lead. But luckily, to their credit, the partner's credit, he was unbelievably helpful. He actually made calls to two other guys that were, also going to be part of the round, see if they wanted to co-lead it. And then in addition to that, he connected me with somebody else who was another partner of his that loved the cannabis space, that always wanted to get in. And that person actually has the capability as himself. He has a family office, and he had the capability to lead around. And he pretty much, after 2 phone calls, said, okay, take the term sheet that those guys were going to sign, send it to me, I'll sign it. And that was like, sometimes, you look at it, you say, like, where are you going to go, right? You just spent 2 months working with this potential lead investor. And then they, for good reason, they had to drop out. I understood it, but it was like, it still doesn't make it any easier. And then you say, okay, where am I going to go now? Right. I have 3 months worth of runway, and then I'm in trouble. So what are we going to do? And luckily for me, that this person came around, he led the round. We were able to close the round. We were oversubscribed by $1 million. So we were able to close the round. And that was great. And then we were off to the races. And then for the A round, it's funny. I was advised by the lead of our round from the year before to get a new lead. You want to get a new lead because you want to be able to kind of get an independent view of the value of the business today versus a year ago. And I thought it was very good advice. So I did my research. I targeted just 2 companies, 2 funds that are focused on cannabis to see if they'd be interested. And both of them gave us term sheets, which was great, way different than the last time. And we got together with my advisory group that are investors, and we picked the one that we liked the better of the 2. They led the round, and we basically from start to finish closed the round in 60 days. So it was very quick.
60 days. Yeah.
The second time.
I think, can you mention some names of who led each round? I think it's publicly out there. I believe I saw these, but would you?
I could definitely, I'm not going to, the person that led the seed round, he's not as comfortable, but yeah, for sure. The one that led the A round is a company called Altitude Investments out of New York City. They're, 4 partners, really, really smart guys, all coming from different sides of the financial services industry. And they started this fund after doing some personal investing in cannabis. And, they had, at the time, I think they raised a $30 million fund. They were making about 12 investments from that fund. And we were one of the 12. And now they're raising another fund. So they happen to be a great, they're very involved in cannabis investing in general. So they're a great partner to have. And that's another lesson that I learned, which is if you have a good story and you have good traction, you should be able to find investors. So now the question is, what investors make the most sense for your business? And what I'm now finding is that you need to understand, what help you need besides the money, and try to see if you could find investors that can provide that help. So, So in our case, we have some really savvy tech guys that are investing with us, which is usually beneficial because my other company is an agency, more of an agency model than a SaaS model. So having, really smart tech guys who have run SaaS businesses is usually helpful. I could pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, here's a situation I'm running into. What do you think? What did you do? How would you approach it? And I leverage them all the time for that. And then in addition to that, having Altitude as a cannabis focused fund, they're very connected in the cannabis space. So they're helping me get into big customers. They're helping me to potential partners. So it's really helpful to have them as well because they, in addition to being really smart guys, they're very well connected in the cannabis space.
Yeah, very interesting. I guess one of the questions I was going to ask is, after that first experience with the Chicago fund that had to pull out, did you only focus on cannabis-related funds? And is that kind of a common theme that even if you're not touching the plant, if you're in the space, you really have to raise from cannabis venture funds?
It's changing now. It's changing. So it was definitely that way about a year and a half ago. It's changing. I think the reason why I focused on those 2 funds is I know that they would know our brand. I know they would understand the business much faster. And there would be less ramp time for me to get them up to speed. So therefore, that's why I did it. It's funny, as part of that, we were getting calls from non-cannabis funds too. People would, we were being introduced and they were very interested. But what I found is it was just going to take longer to get them educated. And quite frankly, and I have a business to run and I want to find the right partners, raise the money we need to raise and go back to work. Right. And I find that's the other lesson is like raising money is a full-time job and it is a lot of work. And it's very hard to be focused on the fundraising and focused on running the business at the same time. It's a difficult balance to have. So I wanted to try learning that the first time. That's what I learned a year ago. I wanted to try to get through this process as fast as I could. And funny story, talk about backstory. We actually had a tech fund this time who was really interested in investing. They wanted to invest $1 million in the round, but they were, as they should be, they were very, very careful in their due diligence. They wanted to come down a few times and meet people. And honestly, I just didn't have the time. And it's like, and I had to call the guy and say, listen, I'm really sorry. I just, I gotta move. And it's like, because if I keep this round open every week I keep a round open, something can go wrong also. Like it's not, that's the other thing I learned too, right? And that's a lesson, which is when you have the ability to close the round because you never know. Like a week from now, something could have happened and our lead investor could have said, you know what, something changed, right? So I'm not interested. I was interested in getting what we needed, which was good partners and the money that we needed, and to get back to work.
Absolutely. Very interesting. Well, congratulations on both rounds. Maybe going back to kind of the starting out that seed round, you mentioned you're not really from the cannabis space. You guys sort of pivoted into the space. So how did you identify the right firms to go out after, and how did you sort of build the network? You talked about network as well. How did you sort of build a network where I assume you didn't really have a network already, right?
Yeah. So I think one of my early advisors, our family happened to have invested in a vertically integrated cannabis company a few years ago in Illinois, and one of our investors and was the person that started that company. So he actually knew a lot of people in the cannabis space. So he was able to guide me and to make some introductions for me. And that's what I mean. It's like finding, number one, understanding who could help you. And this guy could help me. And then, and being vulnerable, right? And basically saying, hey, I need some help, right? I think it's like, and if you ask people nicely for help, most of the time they're going to willing to help you. And I think I brought when we were pivoting to cannabis, I brought the idea to him. He thought it was a great idea. He actually invested with us as well. And then in addition to that, and then I had him on my team. And once I have him on my team, I'm going to use my team. So, and I said, okay, we're about ready to raise this next round. He says, great. Okay. I'm going to put you in touch with this guy, this guy, this guy. And then, and what I've also learned is don't ask for too many introductions because it's a lot of work, right? Ask for a couple. And then use those couple and ask for a couple more and ask for a couple more versus going to a guy like this. He probably knows 50 people, but if I would ask him to introduce me to 20 people, it's going to take him days and he doesn't have time. So I asked him for the best 2 or 3 and he delivered and then it went from there.
Very good. Cool. You mentioned, you got a good story, good traction. You should be able to find investors and all that stuff. Can you talk about what sort of traction did you have? Like what were the whatever data you're willing to share or growth rates, whatever it is? I think that's always, yeah.
So when we were starting to raise our A round, this is the number that's in my mind. We were year over year, we were 700% year over year higher when we started to raise. So September 18 versus September of 17, we had about a 700% growth over that period of time. And we're continuing to see growth. We're continuing to see about 10 to 15% growth a month is what we're seeing. So we don't expect that growth rate to last forever. So we built into our projection a 10% month over month growth for 19, and then we brought it down to 7% for 20. Hoping we could beat that, but from a projection standpoint, we brought it down. Other thing is like investors love to see the big opportunity, but they want to know that you're grounded. And that you're not coming up with, oh, we're going to do $200 million in 3 years, right? They've seen too many of those stories. So, and I learned that the first time a year ago. And again, it's these advisors were telling me, hey, Jeff, don't overpromise, man. Make sure that you put the right numbers together that you believe you could hit. So, but if the story is good enough and people see the big opportunity, they're okay with waiting a little bit to see that big opportunity. They just want to know that you're going to continue to move the ball down the field.
Yeah, good. Awesome. This is really interesting. Looking back, what would you do differently? Any mistakes made, lessons learned, things that you kind of wish you do?
Yeah, for sure. Like when we were raising the A round, I think, it was a fine balance between how long to wait before we started. We got lucky. We raised at the valuation that we wanted to raise at, but it was a little stressful because I waited a little bit because I wanted to wait as long as I could. Yeah. And that's another lesson. I think in retrospect, I probably should have started a bit earlier. I would have had a little less stress if I would have started a bit earlier to raise the money with a little bit more runway. for this round. Because that's the other thing I learned. When you raise money from investors, they want you to spend the money. They want you to use it to grow the business. So it's not like they say, oh, wow, you raised $5 million. That's awesome. Put $3 million in a 3-year CD and then it's there for a rainy day. That's not what they're looking for. So I think finding that balance, I think I waited a little bit too long to raise. And then I think as you're growing a business and moving very fast, I think you just have to focus on what your top priorities are. And I think, and as a founder, you're trying to make sure everything's working. and I think the lesson that I learned is that you have to really rely on people to make sure that a lot of the things are working, and that you as the founder have to focus on the most important things and make sure they're working. And I think that that's another lesson that I continue to learn. Hopefully I keep getting better at it, but it's a lesson.
Kind of a tangent, but did you run the fundraise by yourself mostly, or do you have a co-founder or anyone else, or is it?
No, I ran both by myself. The second one, though, we hired a controller. After the first round, we had the money to hire a controller, so we hired a controller, and I can't tell you how hugely helpful that was for the second round, because all of the due diligence work, all of the numbers work, she was able to do. So I didn't have to, I remember the first time, man, I was in the middle of the night, I was doing numbers and spreadsheets and finding the due diligence thing and that due diligence thing. The second time, she had it all done, and it was great. And then the second thing I did for the A round is I found a firm that had more firepower to help me with the deal. And that was also very helpful too, because they moved the ball very fast.
What kind of firm? You mean like a consultant?
An M&A firm, right? So a firm that focuses on deals, right? So I found, and they actually worked in cannabis. So, it was very helpful. So finding the right law firm to help you and having the right internal partners to help you with the things that you're not great at is also huge.
Any resources or tips for maybe cannabis related businesses to identify investors? Like if you were starting kind of the search of this, where would you start? Anything?
Yeah, so probably the best source of information is a website called New Cannabis Ventures. They're actually just think about them as they're the number one analyst in the cannabis space.
Okay.
And a lot of the most investors read that website every day first. That's the first read they do. So we actually, marketed our company on New Cannabis Ventures, and you have the ability to market it where you could just tell your story, and they will email out to their subscriber base. We would get 40, 50, 60 investor inquiries from that.
Oh, really? Interesting. And were they legitimate leads, good quality leads?
Yeah, I think from our first round, 3 or 4 of our big investors came from there. The second round, we were really lucky. We basically took a lead, and then the rest of the money came from our existing investor base. So they re-upped. So we only really brought in 2 new investors. We brought in the lead, and then we brought in a friend of one of our existing investors. But all the other money came from existing investors.
Yeah, great. Very good. All right. Well, this has been super helpful. Are you starting to think about Series B yet, or that's too far out?
I mean, it's funny because, I after we finished the raise and it was announced, I'm getting all these calls from people that want to see if they could, invest money with us. And I'm kind of scratching my head saying well, we just finished the round. So I was actually, one of our investors was visiting me this morning, and I said to him, so what would you do? Would you just open up another round at some crazy valuation? If people wanted to come in, we let them in. He said, no way. He says, I don't want to dilute myself 1 penny unless we need it. I said, yeah, I agree with you. So the answer is no, we're not thinking about it yet. Now we have the money, we're thinking about focusing on running and growing the business. And that's the other lesson that I think investors have taught me too. When you need the money, you raise it. Don't raise it just to have it. It's not, it's not a rainy day fund. It's a growth fund. So we need to grow in the business.
That's a good point. You mentioned you were sort of number 2 in what you're doing. Is the number 1 or whatever. Heavily funded? Is your competitors heavily funded?
They actually joined a group of other companies, and they went public on the Canadian exchange last year. So the good company, smart company, good competitor, and I like to tell our people we've grown now. I think a little bit more than a year ago, we had 8-9 people working here. We have 35 people working here now, and
Wow.
it's going to go to 50 people within 6 months. So I like to tell my colleagues, I said, it's good to have a good competitor. It keeps you sharp and it keeps you focused. So I'm glad we have them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That's great. Are they all in Boca Raton? Is that
No, so most of them are in Boca. Actually, our chief revenue officer is based out of San Francisco. And then we have salespeople in Colorado and in Washington. And we're going to be adding about 6-7 people on the West Coast in the next couple months as well.
So my last question is usually anything you want to plug, or are there any open job recs you want to promote, or any other thing you want to plug?
Yeah, so we're always in the need of great engineers. So if anyone knows some great engineers, please send them my way. I'd love to talk to them. And we're always looking for great salespeople. So great salespeople and great engineers. But no, overall, it's been a lot of fun. Every day comes with its set of challenges, obviously, in a fast growth business where you're always trying to catch up a little bit because, you're never over prepared in a growth business like this, in a startup. So we're having a lot of fun and we're seeing some good results. So all is good on our front.
Very good. All right. If people want to learn more, it's simply springbig.com, correct?
Correct.
Very good. All right. Well, this is fun. I've learned already a lot about this exciting new market. It helps to be in a good, thriving market, right? That makes a lot of things easier.
It
right?
is. I have to say, it's unbelievable. I think, for people that are in this market, I don't think there's a comparison in my lifetime. I think the best comparison I have is when the country came out of Prohibition. Back in the 30s. I think that's probably the comparison. It's about 90 year ago comparison. It's like, to be in an industry that's literally being created from the ground up is usually interesting to be a part of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exciting. What's the hardest part? Last question. What's the hardest part about this space or this business?
The hardest part is navigating the business side, but also trying to keep tabs on the regulation side. I mean, there's a lot of regulations that are state by state, and you need to understand what's happening from a regulatory standpoint in addition to the business standpoint. So I think so when you talk about point of sale systems, and one of the reasons why there's so many point of sale systems that are unique to this industry, because they do two things in this industry. They manage, let's call it the retail operational side, right, of the business, but they also are the regulatory piece. They're the reporting piece for regulatory. So it's a unique component. So I think our business, there's always a regulatory component that you need to be abreast of. So it's those two things. So I find those two things takes more time and a little bit more resource.
All right. Well, Jeffrey, this is great. I've learned a lot. It's been fun. Springbig.com. Check it out, and we'll catch you after your next round. Good luck on continued growth. I'm sure you're probably sick of all the cannabis related puns, like
No, it's the industry we're in. We're all good.
All right. Thanks, sir. Have a good day. We'll catch you after your next round. Bye. Okay. I can stop recording.